Well, welcome everyone to this edition of TNL Talks. I'm Gene Trowbridge of the law firm of Trowbridge Nieh, and we're securities lawyers. And I have a whole series of interviews that you'll find on our YouTube channel with syndicators. And we're always interested in the latest news that syndicators can tell us about what's going on in the marketplace. How did they get there? What's good they think is going to happen in the future? And today I'm lucky enough to be able to talk to a client of mine, which is pretty exciting. Someone I've known for many, many, many years to the CCIM network. And he's out of Kentucky. And Mr. Bo Barron, why don't you say hi to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, thanks, Gene, and hello to the audience. I'm actually the third generation of real estate guys here in Kentucky, and so I grew up with a dad who was a builder and a commercial developer, and then a broker. He kind of went through those transitions when I was a kid. Ended up in commercial brokerage. And so I went into the Marine Corps for a period of about 5 years. And when I got out, I started working with my dad. It just seemed like the most natural thing to do. And I was a broker for about 8 years. And I remember thinking, how on earth do I get from my seat to my dad's seat? How do I go from being the broker to actually being the investor and being the owner? And it was about that time that our mutual friend, Rod Santomassimo, interviewed Gene, and he sent that interview out through one of his newsletters. And I remember listening to Gene explain what a syndication was. And it was the answer to the question of how do I get from my seat to my dad's seat? And so I remember thinking, that's a path I understand. That can get me to where I wanted to go. And so over the years, I did my first deal. It was small. It was with friends and family. It was, we can talk maybe a little bit more about that, but for every deal I've done, Gene is the one who's, Gene or his firm, they've done, all the docs. They've kept me out of a ditch. In fact, it was your workshop that actually taught me how to understand what a syndication was, how to do it correctly, how to make sure I was going through the correct steps and staying out of trouble. So just about everything I know about syndicating has all been from you. So thank you very much. And
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yep.
Now, you and I have a long history of being involved in the CCIM Institute. Do you have any positions there today on the national level?
I'm on some committees, on the Member Services Committee, Faculty Subcommittee. I'm on the CCIM Foundation Board, but I'm also an instructor. So I'm an instructor for the 102. I know you were an instructor for about 40 years. I think maybe we just missed each other in that space. But one of the most fun things that I get to do is go teach that 102 course for the Institute. Just really, really love doing that.
Yeah, for a very short time, I was a senior in all 4 courses, and then they changed the rule and said you really can't do that, which made a lot of sense. But I always thought 102 was the most timely and the most important course, and the one that probably changes the most because there's new demographic information and ways to capture it. So not being that interested in having to keep up with that stuff, I walked away from that course. But I always thought that was a very, 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 very practical course. There's not much new about how to teach IRR, and that fit with me for 40 years. I thought that was great. But one of the things that happened when I was in the CCIM program, because I was a broker for a while, but very early on, 1973, I did my first syndication, is I noticed the CCIM program never taught anything about group ownership. Every deal was an individual. Every case study was an individual. And in 104, and I'm consulted on the material in 104 every year when they think about rewriting it. I think we have a vicious 4 pages, double-sided though, on a group invested in syndication. And it's just a warning that it's a whole new world. And my book is called It's a Whole New Business, and it is. And that was one of the things that to teach CCIMs, and just because you're a real estate broker doesn't mean you're going to move right into syndication. I still get people who send me an email. I've been a broker for 30 years. I want to do my first syndication. What do I need to do? And I said, well, you need to learn about the securities laws. And they thought being a broker is enough. So let me start. I've heard a little bit about this. The audience has heard a little bit about this, but and I know you're tied in with your dad, but can you answer the question, how did you happen to do your first syndication? What was it that drove you to your first deal?
Well, I'd taken the workshop and I'd learned kind of how it actually works from you. And so then I started looking for a deal that could work potentially. Found a deal. It's 12-unit apartment complex. Started talking to, my small fledgling database of friends and family. I think we bought the deal for, I think it was $465,000. It's probably 15, maybe even more than 15 years ago. $465,000 for 12 units. And I started putting my little group together. I think it was about 4 people. And when it came time to put the money up, they all backed out. Every single one of them backed out. And I don't blame them, because with me, you had somebody who had about 4 years of brokerage experience, maybe 5, never done this deal before, never owned anything myself before. I think I'd just gotten my designation. I knew how to underwrite a property. I could talk intelligently about the numbers, but I was young. I just didn't have much seasoning at that point. And so I don't blame them. And I was bummed out in my office. My dad walks by, sees me. He's like, "What's wrong with you?" I was like, "Everybody bounced on the deal." And he goes, "Well, do it yourself." And I'm like, "Look, A, I don't have the money. And B, like, I'm not bankable. Like, if you look at my balance, like my personal financial statement, I'm not even bankable." And he just laughed, basically. He goes, "Go talk to the banks. They'll fight over you because they'll want to get their hooks into little Barron," which was basically exactly what happened. And then he said, "Go talk to your granddad." And so my granddad gave me the down payment. The banks gave me the money. I went and did the deal anyway. But that was my first attempt at a syndication. And I remember thinking, look, maybe this was a failure, but I still ended up owning the property. It still did what I thought it would do. And so the next time around, have I done this before? Absolutely. I've done it before. It didn't work out exactly the way, but every one of those people that decided not to put their money in would have done well if they would have. And so it's like it gave me a little bit of a track record. And so when I tried again with a 48-unit apartment complex, we were able to raise the money pretty quickly, do the deal, and it just started to create somewhat of a track record. I think at this point we've done, I think 6 deals over the years. So not a lot. It's not even really my main thing, because we own a brokerage company. We own a property management company. We've got, some of the commercial properties that my dad developed himself that I bought him out of a handful of years ago. And I get to teach for the Institute. So like the syndication part of our business is not even the main thing. But it continues to grow, and I wouldn't be surprised a couple years in the future if it isn't the main thing that we do. But that's kind of how I transitioned into really from the broker seat to an owner seat, and the vehicle of syndication is what allowed me to do that.
Well, I'm now 38 for 38. I've had 38 interviews with syndicators, and I've asked them all the same question to start with. And the answer is always, I found a deal that I wanted to do, and I didn't have enough money to do it myself, basically. Same with me. I never interviewed myself, but it would be 39 for 39 if I had. In 73, I graduated from college in 73, I was in the business, and I bought a couple of single family houses as an investment in the Twin Cities where I was from. And I ran into a 7-unit apartment building. $70,000 in West St. Paul.
Mhm.
And I went out and I found 7 guys I'd gone to college with, $10,000 each, and we paid cash for it. Because I didn't know anything about financing it or anything like that. You know, and I didn't even do it right. One of the guys was an attorney at that time, and Jay wrote the limited partnership agreement for us, but we didn't do anything like a PPM. We didn't know, but that's how I got started. And then it went on. It went on. I liked it. I actually liked it better than being a broker. I liked managing other people's money. I felt comfortable with doing it. I communicated with them well. I noticed that they had confidence in me. And that's what all of our first deals are. Friends and families or people who know that we've done something well. And now, yeah, it might be our first syndication, but we've got some real estate acumen that they want to invest in. So that's fine. And then you said you've done 6 deals. Now, I hadn't told you I was going to ask you this question, but I think this is important for your property management, your brokerage business, and your syndication business, and for the audience. Have you run into any situations where you think there's a conflict?
Yeah, there can potentially be conflicts sometimes. So, for instance, in the brokerage business, we won't buy our own listings.
Mm-hmm.
So none of the deals that I've ever done have been our own listings. The optics, at best, the optics look bad.
Absolutely.
At worst, man, you can really be accused of,
Mm-hmm.
taking advantage of your clients. So we won't buy our own listings. That seems to kind of keep us safe.
That's right. When you walk in the door of a seller who thinks you're coming in to give a listing presentation, you got to give a listing presentation. I ran into it where I was syndicating, and I walked into the room of a seller to give a listing presentation, and the seller just said, "Well, I don't need a listing presentation. Why don't you just buy it, and we won't have a commission?" Very uncomfortable position. And of course, I'm such a jerk. I said, "Well, I'd buy it, but not at the price you want to sell it for. So let's talk about listing it first and see if we get someone else to pay your price."
Sure.
And
go
that's
search for the bigger fool.
Yeah. So that's I think that's true. And in the workshop you've been to, I have examples of when you've done an office building, you've got a 10,000 square foot vacancy. You've syndicated it, you have a 10,000 square foot vacancy. And on the listing side in your brokerage business, you have someone else's listing with a 10,000 foot vacancy. And today someone walks in the door and says, "Hey, I'm looking for a 10,000 square foot office space." Wow. You show them the one that you have. You show them the one the other investor. When do you tell the person that this first one I'm going to show you, I'm the managing member of an LLC that owns it? You can deal directly with me, or now I'm over here, and we have to go to the seller, and it's complicated. I mean, there's a lot of complications, a lot of conflicts. I don't want to dwell on that, but I'm glad you recognize that can be a problem, and that's a great solution. My solution, Bo, was to walk away from the brokerage business, and
I have personally almost removed myself from the brokerage business. Like, there's very little that I do anymore personally, and just about any lead that comes in the door goes to our agents who I support. But it's still a little bit of a, what do they call it, like it could be argued that that's just semantics, because I still own the brokerage company, and that's true.
And if you get a reputation of cherry picking all the good deals, 2 things.
And nobody's
That's
going to
going
want
to
to
be a
work with you.
problem. That's going to be a problem with other sellers. And you've got agents who are in your company who have clients who'd like to buy good deals, and the word will get out
Yep.
that Bo Barron gets a presentation from one of his agents on a good property, and Bo and his close circle of friends buy that property. That's going to cause you trouble.
Yeah. So we just try to be real careful, and we're very, very transparent and upfront. Like, we don't want any surprises, especially when we're, in an area that could be deemed a conflict of interest. We want to make sure everybody understands all the angles, and that we can do a deal in a way that's above reproach.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have had people who have come to me, and we've talked about this before they do their first deal. And after the first deal, some people have said, well, I understand what you're talking about, and it is too much of a conflict, and my livelihood depends on my brokerage business, so I won't do another syndication. I've had people come to me and say, boy, that's pretty cool, Gene, I understand, and I think I can make a career out of this, but I better give up the brokerage business. And then I've had people who, probably smaller markets, need to do both to make a living, and we have a conversation about the conflict. So that was a little out of the ordinary, but when you brought that up, I thought that would be something interesting for our listeners.
Yeah. Well, the nice thing about where I sit here in Kentucky is we are a small market, but I'm the third generation, as I mentioned before, and my dad and my granddad have been known as men of integrity. And so I get the benefit of all the work that they did, all the times they told the truth, all the times that they acted in the best interest. And so we just try to perpetuate that through my generation and hopefully pass it along to and we do it by being honest and just being real upfront about what roles that we play in whatever. But traditionally we're brokers first. We don't buy our own listings. And I've done a handful of syndications over the years. I'm not known locally as a syndicator.
So what do you think is going to happen in the real estate industry short term? Let's say the next 2 years. What are we looking at in the commercial real estate industry?
Who knows?
That's a great answer.
I don't have a clue. Well, I do strongly believe in a few things. Now, how all this plays out, I'm not sure. But I believe that in every market cycle, and every point in the market cycle, in any market, there are opportunities. I believe that. You just have to have the skill set and the diligence to go find those opportunities. And at the end of every single downturn there's been an upturn right after that.
Yeah, we've been in a few cycles, wouldn't you say, in our career?
Yes.
Your dad.
And I'm finally old enough to be able to say I've been through,
right.
Through 08 to 10. I've been through the last couple of years. I've been through 2 down cycles, and I've seen the history on all the other ones. And at the end of all of those, things got better. And so I fully expect for that to happen, maybe in the next 2 years. But I don't have a crystal ball, and I'm not an economist, and I'm probably not near as smart as the people who pontificate on what they think is going to happen but I'm optimistic about the future. And I think even in the down, a lot of money's made in down markets where people who can find those opportunities and, they've got a real advantage.
That's what I'm finding. I'm finding maybe from July of last year, we're filming this in March of 2024. From July of last year, going backwards a year and a half, people who had bought properties in 2012, 2013, at 6, 7, 8 normal cap rates, could see that they could sell them at 3. So the motivation was just to cash out. Now, most of the deals that I'm looking at, there's a personal motivation from the seller. And it could be the fact that there's a loan coming due. that they're other than some personal issue, or they're getting too old, they're retiring. I a lot of syndicators got into deals, or people got into deals that they've held for 7, 10 years, and 7, 10 years, you're older. Maybe you don't want to manage apartments anymore. Maybe you want to, the old days, do an installment sale and collect interest. Who knows?
Mhm.
But I think that's what I'm seeing. The good brokers are out there trying to find the personal stories of property owners that may require them or interest them in moving their asset. It's just not greed. And we had a good 2 solid years of greed. There was no doubt about it.
Yeah. And look, what you're describing is what Donald Miller, who wrote a book called Story Brand, describes as the internal conflict. It's the stuff that's below the surface. You're not talking about dollars and cents. It's the things that are deeper. A woman might want to. I had a client like this. She wanted to sell her single family rental portfolio and a couple duplexes and fourplexes. She wanted to sell it all. The reason she wanted to sell it all, and we had to dig to figure this out, is she wanted to redeploy that capital into something that would give her a more stable income so she could travel and spend more time with her grandbabies. She wanted to sell to spend more time with her grandbabies. It
Right.
wasn't about the dollars and cents. It was about something else. And that's that internal
Position.
kind of below the surface stuff. And I agree. I think the best brokers out there right now are figuring out what those internal reasons are and solving those problems for their clients. And they're winning a lot of business because of that.
Well, I know you've heard me talk, and you've interviewed me on your show. So I'm going to ask you this question, and I would hope you give me the right answer. The last question is, what advice would you give to a rookie who is thinking about syndicating their first deal?
Yeah, and I know what you want me to say, and I'm going to tell a story, and I'm going to give you the right answer. All right. The first deal that I ever did, I'm talking with your firm, and they're asking me, all right, what happens if you get hit by a bus? And I'm like, well, my dad was the other guy in the deal. And, he had much more experience than me. If I get hit by a bus, the group actually gets an upgrade. He's got more experience, more wisdom. He's been a designee since I was in high school. But it's that continuity that makes a big deal. And then for me, this would be my second bit of advice. Once I actually started to try to raise money, it became abundantly clear that as I'm walking down the street on any particular day, in the back of my mind, I need to be thinking, right, I need to be purposeful about building relationships with people who might potentially want to invest in the future. I need to do that on purpose as I go throughout my day, every day. And I'm not always great at doing that, and every time I need to start raising money again, it's my database that becomes incredibly valuable. So for a rookie syndicator, like, find you somebody you can start with that can provide continuity to your investors, and ideally fill in some gaps. So if you don't have a lot of experience, find somebody with some experience. If you don't have a lot of track record, if you don't have a track record, find somebody with a track record. If you don't have much of a database, find somebody that's got a database. I've got a partner right now.
I've had pretty good success in matching a broker who I would call a bird dog. Boy, they can find great deals, but let's not burden them with managing the properties.
Yep.
And let's find a really good property manager who can write reports and communicate with owners, but wouldn't know a good deal if it hit them with the bus. And let's make a team. And some of the enhancements that you can get from other people is money raising, is a balance sheet. You said you weren't bankable, so a perfect person to team up with is someone who is bankable, but may not want to be in the day-to-day business of being a syndicator. But
That's right.
and there's financial statements, which is a value, and they should get paid for that. So I think that's all very, very true. I think one thing that I think of is this is not a do-it-yourself. This is not a do-it-yourself business. I won't represent a client who thinks that they can do it themselves. And I hesitate representing a client who says, well, our team is my wife and I. Okay, what does your wife know? Or it's the wife who said, and I have one of those, a very good syndicator, well, it's going to be my husband. Well, yeah, her husband is in the chip manufacturing business. What does he know about triple net, single tenant triple net buildings? So that may not, but it does solve continuity. But I'm going to let the marketplace decide if it's sellable. If the marketplace should say, what happens if something happens to you? Well, Bobby's going to do it. Well, Bobby's, not sophisticated enough in real estate. And we had that situation in two transactions during COVID, that the person who knew died. And the continuity person didn't really know as much as we thought they did. And that caused, basically it caused the investors to vote them out and put someone in who did know. In one situation, it was difficult to get that vote. In another situation, the person willingly decided to move out of the way because they had a lot of money invested too, and they needed some help. So it's not a nothing down. It's not a nothing down do-it-yourself business. I mean, you get started in a deal, you got to hire an attorney, you've got to do earnest money that may or may not be refundable. You've got to pay for the due diligence before you raise them a penny.
That's right.
If it goes right, you'll get it back, but it might not go right.
Yeah, and that's the risk of the syndicator.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to pay money up front, and if it doesn't work, that's our risk. That's what we have at risk.
Well, you'll understand that, and anyone listening to us who's been in the CCIM designation world will understand that. My T-bar of the syndicator's position has on the top, where everyone else puts your initial investment, the word risk. Because if you do it right, the syndicator is going to invest just like all the other investors, going to buy the A units, if you would, because that's where all the money's made. But they're going to collect fees in shares of the cash flow, and they're not investing anything to do that other than their risk. So if you want to get technical, how can you measure the value of the syndicator's position when the
present value
investment is risk? You have to you can't do an IRR because you put it in the machine, it says unable to compute. So you have to put a number in there, and you have to take a present value approach. If I could get more of my clients to get with me early enough to use that type of approach to look at what their splits are and how they're going to do their deal and what's it worth to them. Because sometimes I think that what they're asking for isn't worth the risk that they're taking. And I know from my experience, Bo, the first couple deals I did, the most important T-bar was there enough for the investors so that I knew I could raise money? And then I'll take what's left over.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what I did.
Absolutely a mistake. You put yourself, the property does this, the lender does this, the syndicator does this, all with a need. And once those three needs are met, you go and look and see, is there enough left for the investor? And if there isn't, you don't do the deal.
That's right.
It's not, well, I'll take a little from me to give it to them until you have a deal. So it's an analysis game, and you have to be careful.
And look, a lot of the people who start trying to transition into syndicating are brokers. And the biggest issue with brokers is they get deal fever. And they just want to get the deal closed. It's like the big win. And then they wake up the next day and they're like, oh crap, I got to operate this thing. Like it's not over now because I'm an owner and I'm responsible for this whole deal. And they get wrapped up in the deal fever, and it can lead to, some of the mistakes you're talking about, where you just take what's left over And I
Yeah.
remember the first time, and you told me to do it this way. And I figured out what my net present value would be. And I thought about, like, is that enough money to make it worth the next 5 years, 7 years of my life operating this deal? And it was kind of a binary decision. I was like, all right, I think it's worth it. Let's do the
Yeah.
deal.
Because the alternative is let's just broker the deal
That's
and get
right.
our commissions now and cut the
And
cord.
be done.
One of the things that I think is important in all that is if you normally, I think we're going to look at a real estate investment that might take 5 to 10 years, maybe 5 to 7. The old days, the 2022 days when it was a 3-year hold isn't going to work anymore. So it's 5 to 7 years. And if you've done enough syndication to know that in 5 to 7 years, one of your investors is going to run into a personal problem, and
Yep.
they're going to come to you to solve it because you have their money.
Mhm.
So one of the things, the fourth question that I think an investor should ask is, do your documents, the documents I'm going to sign, do they have provisions for liquidity in case, I know your continuity is important to me. I know your track record is important to me. I know that you having skin in the game is important to me. But is there a way for me to get out of the deal in case I need it? And none of those questions have to do with cash on cash or cap rate or anything, but those are the 4 questions you should ask. And we've all had changes in our life that
Sure.
go on 6 or 7 year deal. And I always say to the class, there's 20 of you in this room. If I put together a deal with you today and it's going to last 10 years, who's the first one that's going to come to me looking for their money? And how do I have that positioned? And what's going to happen, because if you look back 10 years at your own life, things change. So yeah, you not only bought a life of a property, which has its own challenges, but you've bought 20 or 30 investors' lives at the same time. It's a challenge. Well, that's all great. Why don't you tell us? I have a picture for people who are watching it. They can see your picture, Barron Commercial Group, and they can see your website, but not everyone is going to watch it. So why don't you tell us how we can get a hold of you in the Kentucky marketplace?
Sure. So yeah, my website for the company is Barron Commercial. It's BARRON commercial.com. You can reach out to us by phone, 270-926-1101. I do have a podcast where I teach my little brother, who is an actor and a comedian, all things commercial real estate. It's called Commercially Speaking, and you can find that wherever you consume podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, etc. And then we're also on social media, so you can look at Bo Barron, CCIM on Twitter, or Commercially Speaking on most platforms.
That's really great. I got to tell you what my Twitter handle is. Not retiring.
Not retiring.
Not retiring.
I
When
love it.
past partnership in the law practice separated, the partner I had who went on their own started telling people that one of the reasons going on their own was a good idea is they thought maybe I was slowing down a little bit. So I immediately came up with the Twitter handle of not retiring. So
well, I'm glad to hear it, because we're just ramping up and we're going to have a lot of future work for you.
Yeah, I can see
so
with the partner you brought in on this deal to work with, I can see that there's going to be some of that. So I'll be looking forward to your business. And I thank you very much for taking the time out today. And everyone who's listening to TNL Talks, our website will get you into our YouTube channel, which is just simply TNL LLP, and you can see all sorts of great interviews with people just like Bo. Thanks very much, Bo. Talk to you later.
all right. Thanks, Gene. Talk soon.